Okay, so sorry about the little bumpy start there, but today is going to be a very interesting conversation. Definitely, everybody's going to learn a ton today. CMMC compliance. What you need to know. How do my business do this? So this could be a competitive advantage for you. But first, Grant, I want to have you talk a little bit about CMMC compliance and what it is, why it matters now. What does CMMC, what are the levels? There's different levels to it. What are the different IT frameworks that are involved? And then we'll kind of close it up with a really good session on a roadmap for becoming CMMC compliant and getting that certification. So let's start off a little bit before we get going about obviously Succurri. This is when you talk about cybersecurity, CMMC, we'll get into a little bit of that. We'll talk about compliance as a service. As always, go to our YouTube channel, hit subscribe, like this stuff, get more subscribers every day, every week. It's great. We have these conversations once a month and just trying to be valuable to the business community out there from the IT perspective, but it's all about getting better together as a business. So please do get out there and subscribe to that.
Well, my son thinks I'm a hero because I've got a YouTube channel. So, woohoo.
Oh, hey, not a bad
And,
thing being a
and,
hero.
and we have people that follow us. So that's good.
That's great. It's always good to have your son look up to you or daughter. So what CMMC, what is it? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? What's the purpose?
Yeah. Yeah. So CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. The reason why it's become really, really important over the last couple of years, it's a newer concept in the cybersecurity world, is that the government has adopted this as their overarching framework and has a lot of different frameworks that are involved in it. But this is the way that they are able to categorize and judge where you're at your maturity level or your journey through cybersecurity. And they have specific requirements depending on what kind of data that you're dealing with. Obviously, most notably, DoD here in October is making sure the language is in all the new contracts that you have to have a certain level of CMMC, whether it's level 1, 2, or 3 compliance to be able to apply for the contracts or be rewarded the contracts. Now, obviously, with everything in the government, there's varying degrees of enforcement to certain things, and so who only knows how that's going to turn out. But the language that's being used is that it's going to be required in all DoD contracts and in government contracts, I believe, in 2028. So keep in mind, this goes back to something that we repeat in a lot of these conversations: is it's all about starting somewhere, and so that's really the government is taking that stance as well. Is that it's taken some time to get business owners to this level. And now they're saying, okay, here's a really easy path. And I think that's why CMC has been really important, is that it makes it the barrier of entry into having, frankly, best practices in place for your organization to protect the data that the government is giving you. So keep in mind, the data that you're dealing with is the government's, and they want you to secure your environment to protect their data. And that's the whole general understanding of what's going on here.
They want you to follow the rules and fundamentals and disciplines around security, IT security, cybersecurity, if you're going to be what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's going to be interesting because there's not a lot of people that have gone through this process. Now, I think, obviously, DoD contractors that are dealing with, some very, very sensitive information have these controls in place already. I think where we're going to see most of the shift is in level 2 and level 1 compliance, because it's not just, hey, you're dealing with, blueprints for a Army helicopter. It's going all the way down to just some contract information, right? Anything that can be used as a potential lever for, accessing information, they're trying to protect that as well.
And so from the perspective of competitive advantage, Andrew, how should companies be looking at this as maybe an opportunity?
Yeah, certainly. So as the DoD becomes more rigid about accepting contracts from contractors that are CMMC compliant. What that means is the ecosystem of contractors is going to, at least for a period of time, be really small, right? Because there's not a lot of contractors that have this certification yet. And as of October 25th, the DoD has said, in general, it will only accept contracts from certified subcontractors. And so what that could mean is, for a period of time, you have a tremendous competitive advantage if you have CMMC compliant. So, like Grant said, get started is kind of the place the thing we recommend for everybody. One of the things, actually, if you just go back to the other slide really quickly, and we may touch on this again somewhere else, but what we're seeing as well is that the prime contractors, so those contractors that work directly with the Department of Defense that are giants like Boeing and Raytheon, they're the ones that are going to be forcing this probably more than anything else, because they're responsible for managing the compliance of their subcontractors, which is the majority of the companies that would work in Department of Defense contracting. So where the DoD may not have its enforcement resources, the prime contractors definitely will.
So let's talk about levels. Grant, you just said something about levels. Tell me how this works.
Yeah, and just I'll kind of start by trying to clear up something that I've had a couple questions on in the past. So CMMC 2.0 is version 2.0. So there was a CMMC version 1, and it had 5 levels. And what they've done with version 2 is they've broken it down into 3 levels to make it a lot easier to, one, get started, but also achieve those different levels. And it really has become very well defined of what data is available at those different levels. So with level 1, the level 1 is really that kind of the fundamentals of cybersecurity. As I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, how do I become level 1?" I'm like, yeah, honestly, you should be doing all level 1 already. Even if you're not requiring CMMC, these are just the basics. Like, do you enforce passwords on your computers? Does every person have their own username and password? Do you lock your doors? Like, it's really, really fundamental stuff, and very easy to obtain. What I always like to tell people is, like, you just have to have somewhat of a formalized process, and you can be basically CMMC compliant, level 1 compliant, at least with the services that we provide, in a very short amount of time. Then you have like level 2. The level 2, it starts getting a little bit more stringent. Obviously, with level 1, you have a self-assessment. And so that's basically you're going through and looking at all these different controls and saying, yes, I have these. Here's the evidence that I am doing these specific things. So, and I will say that, so we'll use safeguards and controls interchangeably through this conversation. And so like level 2 requires the next step up, right? It starts getting, it goes from relatively easy to, yeah, these are things that you probably should still be doing as a business, but they are definitely more stringent. They're going to be, and we'll get to the next slide, but basically you'll see it from like 17 controls to 110 controls, and then level 3 is 110 plus. Like it adds it on like another 100 I think to 145, something like that. But anyways, so as you go through, so level 2, you need to have an individual person, a third party group come in and do the assessment for you. Actually, a little fun fact. So at least in this year, you can do your own self-assessment on level 2. So as long as you're good, you don't have to pay for that additional assessment this year. So if you're looking to do level 2, that's something to think about. But the assessment is about having a third-party auditor come through and actually verify that you've done all your homework, you've checked all your boxes, and everything is in order. And then you get into level 3, and then that's actually where the government is coming in and doing the assessment. So that can be done from a couple different departments. So who leads that assessment will be based on where the data is coming from. But yeah, so level 3, at that point, you are considered at expert level. You are doing everything humanly possible to protect that data, and that data is going to be significantly more sensitive than obviously what you'd see at level.
So basically, it sounds like in the past, maybe most of the security and CMMC 1.0, 5 different levels, they're moving to to 3 different levels. It was mostly centered on Department of Defense and cybersecurity around Department of Defense, but now what they're saying is going forward, this is going to be for all contractors.
Yeah, and honestly, it makes really good sense when you look at how they break the frameworks out. And so with level 1, you're just dealing with the FAR compliance. Then level 2, you're moving into a completely different framework, which is the NIST 800-171. And then at level 3, you're adding on. So 171, then you layer 172 on top of that. And so kind of keeping it really simple at level 1, that, like I said, that is going to be the baselines that you should be doing today anyways. And it's not hard to achieve. Level 2 is where you're dealing with controlled but unclassified information, and also dealing with security protected data. So that stuff can be information that is not classified at the moment, but at some point potentially could. And so you are really looking to have all these specific controls in place to really protect that data. Then you get to level 3, and that's really about advanced persistent threats and protecting that from things that like nation state attacks. And so that's really going to be where your sensitive information about, so like military weapon systems, military technology, and sensitive research. So as you build your building blocks, the information gets much more sensitive and potentially more damning if something happens to it.
Well, and you guys have supported companies that have gone through some of this, having the government classify information, government that was information that was controlled, unclassified information, and the government comes along and says, oh, now this is classified, we need you to move up a level.
Yeah, so that's called spillage. And so design of these types of systems is really, really important, and classifying data is really, really important, because if spillage does happen, and it probably will, you've got Navy or military coming in and saying something that you've been designing for us it was controlled but not classified, has now become a major part of our defense systems, and now it's becoming classified. So what do you do, right? So the experiences that we've had is that they'll come in and basically you have to sanitize your entire systems. And so because they never will allow you to have any chance of restoring that piece of classified information. So you're blowing out backups, you're blowing out file shares, you're blowing out reversion controls. And if you don't classify your systems properly, that means that you're clearing out everything in your systems to be able to protect that data. And so conversation for a completely different day, but yeah, design is really, really important in how you set it up, so that way you can control these types of environments.
So you mentioned frameworks earlier, and NIST comes up, FAR comes up. There's these frameworks, and I always ask you, like, what framework? Why do they call it a framework? What is it? And I'd like them to change the name to discipline, because it's a discipline of how you function, how you protect the information that your systems have in it, right? It's a framework of controls. I get it. I know why they call it a framework. I'm really kind of joking, but talk to me about these frameworks that are tied into these different levels and what that.
I don't think, I wouldn't say that you're off by talking about discipline, right? I mean, keep in mind when you start getting, so like level 1, I don't think you're really changing much about what you do in a day-to-day basis, right? Your organization is going to function pretty much the same way. And hopefully you have a lot of these controls in place already. When you get to level 2, you have to start changing culture a little bit, because it might be that a lot of these things that you now have to do for level 2 are going against maybe some process procedure or lack thereof process and procedure. And it's no more like I can do whatever I want and I can put data wherever I need to, and I don't need to have anything encrypted. Like there's a lot of things that take place in that process, and it might be a cultural shift in your organization. And so, Andrew and I talk about, we can put in technical controls all day long, but the cultural shift, the mentality shift that sometimes has to take place is sometimes a much larger issue than us, actually putting the controls in place. And Andrew, maybe you can speak to some of that.
Yeah, I would say the change in culture is probably the biggest hurdle that we face in IT at any level, not just for CMMC. So people don't like changing their process. A lot of businesses, so if you're, like, to give you an example, if you're on CMMC 1, you should just be like, you should have those controls in place just to protect yourself, but it doesn't, like Grant said, it doesn't really impact you. CMMC 2 is where now you're starting to see some impact, right? People have to change their habits, and habits are really hard to change. CMMC 3, level 3 is where that dictates how business is done, right? Like that's a fundamental shift. So now all the business in your organization is looked at through the lens of how will it impact CMMC 3, level 3, because you can't put data anywhere, right? So now you have to think about it. Okay, we have to have a design structure so we can keep the data somewhere. That has to be put in place ahead of time. Well, like who wants to think ahead, right? You want to just deal with it when it's coming at you. So you go from this really flexible, like very, very flexible and efficient phase of your organization where you're like just doing whatever you need to do as it comes up, to going to the point where it's a very rigid, structured phase of your business. And there's a lot of overhead to maintain that level of security. So there's a lot of cost. There's a lot of human capital. It takes time to do that. There's a lot of frustration that comes with people who are used to being really flexible. So, I mean, if you were to do the psychology, it would be very hard to go from a like traditional small business where you have a ton of flexibility to a CMMC 3 or CMMC level 3 business and keep your same staff, because it's just not the same psychological profile of person. The small business, you have a bunch of gunslingers and they're just doing what they want. It's Wild West. And CMMC level 3 is like it's a black and white world. You follow the process. You have to have people that are very comfortable in that realm, and they're vastly different. So as you grow through that like psychological spectrum, you have a lot of friction that gets generated. Staff's like psychological, like neuroplasticity, right? Their ability to absorb new things gets stretched. Sometimes that snaps and they move on, and you hire people in that better fit that role. So it's a tremendous like psychological strain on your staff.
So these frameworks have, I think in the last slide we talked about, well, the levels you had to adhere to NIST 800-171 or 800-172 and the different levels. And these are just controls or practices that you have to adhere to pass the audit of a level 2 or level 3. Now, you mentioned, Grant, level 2, you can self-assess up to the end of this year. Is that what I heard you say?
Correct. Yeah. So until 2026, October 2026, just because the whole mechanism for CMMC is still just being ironed out. Here's why you can do it. I still recommend a third party. And the reason why is that, one, you're only going to have 1 year that you don't have the third party doing it. So it might save you a few bucks. But the reality is that having a third party brings a different viewpoint in. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. There's never been a single auditor that I've ever met that was the same as the auditor the year before, right? So it's always somebody looking at it through a different lens. And so if you go through a self-assessment and you're like, yeah, I feel pretty good about this. Well, I would say, it's probably worth you throwing your hat in the ring and seeing if you're really up to, what a security professional would agree if you have all those controls in place.
Yeah, why risk it?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think you're not really doing yourself that much of a service. You might save a couple bucks, but it's a short-term fix.
So, yeah, I mean, you don't want to have to call the Department of Defense and say, I'm sorry, I lost your data and it's in the wrong hands now. So.
That would be a tough call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so you guys, Succurri, you're not the auditor, right?
No.
And so your role in doing this is really to make sure people can use this roadmap, and I'll let you guys talk about it here in a second, but it's basically to guide people through what are you trying to achieve with your compliance certification. And I don't know if you can talk about certain clients. Obviously, you can't name them, but there are clients that you have that have these certifications because they do certain things. I don't know if you can name those certain things, but you're constantly looking over where are they at. So maybe, I don't know, Grant, if you want to, or Andrew, whoever, walk me through this roadmap. What does it mean to get compliant, or to become a next level of compliance?
Yeah. So the one thing I like about this is a very continuous cycle, right? So first, when you start going down the path and deciding where you need to be, so it might be that, hey, I've never dealt with a government contract before, but I think that there might be some money in it. At bare minimum, go through the process for level 1. Right, for CMMC level 1. That is your entry point to everything. If you don't do that, you're never going to get anywhere. And if you are working with the DoD already, they're going to tell you what level you need to be at, but the process doesn't change. So once you've determined what level you're going to be at, you're going to go through and conduct what's called a gap analysis. And that will determine what you are missing for that specific level that you're trying to obtain. It'll actually, if you, in a lot of different ways, you can actually show all the different levels and all the things that you're missing. So as you work through your journey, you can continue to, so like once you get level 1, you can start working on level 2 and level 3. So once you finish that gap assessment, then at that point, you have to go back and remediate or fix the issues that are missing that are making you compliant. And so at that point, when you start getting like the assessments, that's level 2, and then like compliance and maintaining compliance, at level on the other side of things. But like level 1 and level 2, you kind of sit in level 3. You're in those first 3 steps over and over and over again. And then you dip out and take the assessment, and then you go back and you're continually updating your processes and procedures and improving your posture of your process and your security over and over again. It's not like a one thing and done. It's really kind of an organic piece, right? You're expected to improve over time. If you have some sort of controls that do okay, but you're not really reporting on it very well, like next year, they're going to want to see you doing a better job of reporting on it. So hopefully that explained it well.
It does. I think so. Basically what you're telling me, look, if you're at level 3 already, you're probably not watching this webinar. And if you are, maybe there's some serious problems and you need, help getting fixing gap, but really you're talking to people who've never got a CMMC compliant certification, and they want to get it because maybe they're wanting to go get government contracts. They see that as a way that, hey, I think we could go do this. Or they're already at CMMC, I always forget the X. They're at CMMC 1 and they're trying to go to level 2, and you guys have some existing clients that are already in that mode, which is maybe the reason why I was like, man, we should probably tell people about this.
Lots of questions. Yeah.
Lots of questions. And so you guys are the guide that helps identify the gaps and make sure that you're identifying what needs to be fixed to remediate those gaps or fill those gaps.
Well, and also fix it. We also fix those gaps too, right? So one thing that compliance has a misconception about, and at least in what I've seen with our clients, is that compliance is grouped with security, and they are very different things. They are cohesive, but they are definitely different things. And so where we come into place is we're helping with fixing those gaps. So it might be a technical control. It might be a policy that's an issue. And so sometimes there's a business unit that needs to help them with that process. And sometimes there's a technical unit that needs to help them with a control. And so we're the ones that are able to come in and help with that. Whether it's helping with developing a process and documenting that, or if it's putting in a control that protects that data, or alerts or reports or whatever it might be that they're missing on.
One of the things when we were building this out, you talked about, well, I think people need to know that this is more attainable than they might think. They think, oh, standard levels, risk, every U.S. government, huge thing. And what I thought was interesting is you guys saying, this stuff is more attainable than you think. Part of your message is just get started. But maybe as you're thinking about this, and Andrew, I don't know if you want to take this from a business case, as a virtual CIO, when you're looking at this kind of thing, like how would you approach this? What would you want people to know about level 1, 2?
Yeah, so in our current customer base, we have 5 companies actively talking with us about this topic, and it just came up out of nowhere. And there were a couple of things we defined that were driving them. So one is that company that doesn't work with the government today, but they want the contracts that are, they're well-paying contracts, they're very stable, they're consistent, whereas the U.S. economy, as it starts to slow down, maybe there's fewer jobs for them to do. So that's the first one, which is, I want to start this process. Where do I start? And the second group is they already work with the U.S. government in some capacity, but it's never in a way that has required any sort of certification or cybersecurity review in the past, but now they have to do it to continue to keep that relationship. So really what we're doing from that standpoint is a lot of discussions about level one. Customers who would go to level two are being told by their prime or by the Department of Defense to bid on this contract, you have to be at this level. So it's a pretty cut and dry thing for them, right? They either have it or they don't. But it's the level ones. And I think that's the majority of our audience that we're probably talking to with this webinar is if you want to get in, don't worry about level three, start with level one. It's really, really easy to do. And like Grant mentioned earlier, is you probably should already have all of those security best practices in place just to protect your organization. So it's not like you're going to be doing a ton of extra stuff. So that's what I would say is it's the companies that are either looking to get into government contracts or are currently there and don't want to get booted out.
So how do you do that? Where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about this. This is kind of the high level overview. It's vendor agnostic. We'll have Grant talk a little bit about how Succurri does this, but the first thing you need to do is so compliance at its essence is a structured process to produce certain documentation. It's a documentation production process. Security comes out of it, but compliance is all about documentation. So the first thing you would need is a tool that helps you through that compliance process. I mean, that tool could be a spreadsheet you download from the National Institute of Standards for those three compliance frameworks we talked about earlier. I would suggest a more sophisticated tool that's actually built around compliance. Those tools are called GRC. And you can find them online. They cost a little bit of money, but they help walk you through the process. They make it way easier. The next one is your organization is going to have to meet those 17 minimum basic best practices for IT and cybersecurity. And they're simple things like Grant said, password, access permissions based upon your user, like your level of user level, restriction of access to documentation or files that you don't need access to. It's not hard stuff like lock your doors. And then you do need to perform that process of creating your audit documentation on a periodic basis. So that's going to be scans. It's going to be actually reviewing systems, and then you're going to document that. But the compliance tool has wizards and forms and can work you through a lot of it. That's why it's good not to start. Like if you want to make things hard, you download the spreadsheet and you start from scratch. If you want to make things easy, you get a nice compliance tool that has all the forms, has all the wizards, and you just put in information. So, from a vendor agnostic standpoint, that's kind of the three steps you have to start with. But Succurri has a way we do it, which, Grant, maybe you can describe a little bit to the folks that are watching.
Yeah, sure. One thing I always like to point out as well is that with the compliance system, you can actually assign people or resources to specific tasks. Like all the time, when I come across something that's having to deal with compliance, one person always gets stuck with it, and a lot of times it's like an operations manager or a financial, like they're like, oh, your operations, you do IT here, it's your problem, right? But compliance is something that everybody has to be involved in. So sometimes there's production processes that need to be involved. Sometimes there are security processes. Sometimes there's financial processes. So everybody has some sort of stake in the game. And the having a tool that you can actually assign people to certain jobs will take the load off of you as well as the person that's kind of running the show. So that's a huge feature versus like, oh, here's an Excel spreadsheet and there's no accountability whatsoever. You're like, great, I'm the owner of the spreadsheet versus having somebody that's responsible for filling out some information. So big plus in those GRC tools. One of the things that we do is we do a lot of systems integrations into our GRC tool. And when I say that, it means that all the information that we collect on all networks that we manage, we're able to actually fill those into the GRC tool, which allows us to do everything from like lifecycle management. It brings in a lot of proof of different controls that we have in place. And so think about basically like an automation of all these things that used to be really manual, where you'd have to go in there, take a screenshot and upload it and say, yep, I've got that in place. With the systems integration, it just does it for you. So it's basically taking a large, significant amount of the workload off of you to having to go in there and doing it all manually. So
what are we looking at here? What's this picture I know this is a little snapshot of,
So this is just Yeah, so this is just a little, this is actually our GRC platform. So at Succurri, we've actually obtained the GTIA trust mark. So we have gone through, basically it cross maps to CMMC level 3 on the most part. So we had 177 controls that we had to implement. You can see here that those are all been deployed and we've been marked as assured. But it is think of it as like the database of record for how we do compliance. So we're responsible for going through a third-party audit every 2 years in our certification. And so we have all this information here. So when we go back and go through an audit again, we have like a history of things that we're doing. So we can show that we're improving in what we're doing in our maturity, right? So keep in mind, security is a journey, and you should be getting better at things over time. And now we have a system to actually show that history.
You know, what's interesting is not every IT company out there knows how to work within these systems. And so it's not like everybody just automatically has this at play, especially like Andrew said, you could go download a spreadsheet grant. Oh, well, someone can control or manage that spreadsheet and you can go through it manually. Your clients all have access to this if they're managed service client at Succurri. And so if you want to go down that road, it seems like, is this something you just plug in? Do you hook to their network? How to maybe give a little bit more about how it works, how you start? Like if someone came to you and said, like one of your clients said, you know, we're thinking about doing this and we've got to get level 1 and they're saying level 2. What, you know, how do you do this? What happened?
Yeah, we like to shortcut the system for them and make it as easy as possible. So once we start that, we would set up a portal for them. We would start connecting all the systems that we manage for them, and we start bringing that information in. And so when you think about like what that really means, so if you have like 17 controls and most of those are proof of a, you know, do you use passwords? Do you have separate usernames? All that information is going to flow in. So you might have, you know, 4 or 5 different things left over after we've connected all of our systems in there that you actually have to attend to. And those are going to be policy and procedure documents. And I'm not going to, you know, tell that an auditor this, but you know, I heard ChatGTP is pretty good at writing procedure documents. So it's just not that hard to get across the finish line, especially with a system like ours that takes those integrations and it just takes the guesswork and like I said, it shortcuts it.
Yeah, and one of the things, you know, if you go back to that slide, it is like that gives us an advantage and gives our customers that real benefit, because in performing a gap analysis, there's a lot, like Grant said, it's a lot of manual work, and that costs money, right? So if you hire a company, they're having to go in and manually figure it out. But if you work with a company like Succurri that already has those management systems in place and can link up those management systems to your compliance tool, and it feeds it 95% of what you would do manually, your audit process gets to be really, really easy. But it's a unique company that does that, right? You have to have an IT services company that's of a certain level of size to be able to even have the tools and the sophistication to do this. But you know, we're talking like savings of tens of thousands of dollars of auditing time, depending on the size of your organization. So yeah, that's a benefit for us, right? Because we're not only doing the auditing and the compliance, we're also doing the housekeeping for managing the computers.
So is this something that you could do, let's say if they weren't an existing client and this is all that they wanted you to do, how would that work?
Yeah, we could. It would just be a lot more heavy lifting. There'd be a lot more manual work. And I think they'd probably look at the cost versus having us manage them as a company and say, oh, well, it makes a lot more sense. Now, one of the things Grant mentioned earlier on in the call, and I think it's important to see this here, is not only do we have the tools that integrate, which do the documentation, but our minimum security best practices for the customers we manage pretty much meet the CMMC level 1. So not only do you get like the documentation side of things, just by working with us, you pretty much are going to have all the security controls in place too, which means you can check a lot of boxes. So like your CMMC 1 certification comes, like, it's really easy because we've built everything that we provide from a security perspective for years. And so as the industry evolves, we continue to align our tools and position our tools to make it easy for customers to meet these compliance requirements, because no one gets value from dollars spent on compliance. The only thing it does is protect you from a lawsuit, or maybe gives you the ability to put in a contract. Like, compliance is a thought game, right? So if you can spend money on IT services and IT protections, and the outcome, the benefit is you can get easy compliance, that's where the real magic comes from.
Oh, interesting. So do you then, with the GRC tool or system that you integrate with other systems, that's something that you guys monitor, right? Ongoing. Like, will it tell you, oh, you're out of compliance now? Tell me about that.
Well, it depends on the level of contract the customer has with us. A lot of our clients are looking at more self-service at the moment. So we provide the tool, we link up the integrations, we tell them what our security controls are that are in place, but they're managing the portal or the GRC tool themselves. But if a client wants us to be actively managing their compliance, so like compliance as a service, then that's where we do go in and we like real time keep it active versus an annual audit.
Right. And that the levels of CMMC, as you go higher, they require more validation of that, more frequent validation of that. Is that right?
Well, yeah.
Grant, you can maybe adjust the time frame. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going through an annual assessment, right? So that will probably change over time because things do fall out of scope over a period of a year. So I probably conversation for another day, but I don't think we're that far away, especially with AI, where a level of continuous compliance comes into play, where you're being looked at, because systems like ours are integrating into these GRC tools. And so they're looking, at it every day of compliance, and so you can see where you're dropping out. That hasn't happened yet, right? That's my future prediction. We'll check back in 3 years and see if I was right. But with the technology, I think it's very possible that will take place. But right now it's just once a year. And here's the deal. You want to keep it up to date, because when you do have to go through an audit and you haven't done anything for an entire year, like, one, it's just mentally stressful. Like, you're like, oh crap, now I got to go through all this. I got to collect all this information and make sure it's all correct. And so you're having to go through the whole process all over again, versus if you keep it up to date on a regular basis, some using our integrations to help fill that in, but like updating a document from here to there, like, then when you come up to that annual check-in, it's already done, right? It doesn't have it's taking a little bite off at a time.
Yeah.
And so if you think of compliance as once a year, and that's all you're dealing with, it becomes a laborious task.
It's like the analogy it's coming to mind is, when you go to the dentist every 6 months, you don't have to. That's what they prescribe, and they clean your teeth. It's not a big ordeal. But if you haven't gone in 2 years and they're like, oh, okay, let's get out the tool that scrapes this crap off of your teeth, it's a little bit of stress and maybe pain.
Yeah, or the tool that pulls the tooth out of your mouth. That's what you're looking to avoid.
And the giant needle that they numb you up. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. All right.
Yeah, but it's the whole thing of just you have to change your culture, right? Security has to become a part of your culture. Compliance has to become part of it. And once it's in as part of your culture, it's not that hard.
Yeah. Well, we have a little time for some Q&A. I did see a question come through about cost and timeline. Now, I don't know if it varies or how you look at it. I'm sure it's the different levels, or, there's more cost time, but is there any information you can share about cost and timeline? Like, if someone were to start today, how long does it take,
Yeah, good question. So yeah, there's not a magic timeline. I do projects all day long, and it's like, it's about 45 days. It depends on what state you're in. So for example, we onboard a new client in 45 days. So with that, I can get somebody to level 1 in 45 days. That's about as far as I can say that, that's how fast it would happen. It obviously depends on the size of the company. Level 2, that's going to take some more time, right? Because you have to get past level 1 to get to level 2, but there's a lot more things that you may have some significant changes that you need to make in your organization to get there. And so that might be psychological it might be technical. And those are things that you just kind of have to work through. But that's where you do the gap analysis. Like once you go through the gap analysis and figure out what things are missing, then it's a lot easier to predict how long it's going to take and what sort of heavy lifting you have to do. And cost is going to be variable as well, right? Getting to level one, is insignificant. Like we're talking a couple $100 a month, right? If you get to level two, there's a ton of security controls that require licensing and monitoring and all those things. So that gets a lot more expensive. The key is, though, is that the government's asking for these things to protect their data. There is an assumption that you are going to turn around and charge them in your bids with these licenses and fees and cost of support. So a lot of people are like, oh, wow, man, this is going to be really, really expensive. And the answer is yes. And you're not paying for it because you're going to build it into your contracts.
Does it matter? This isn't a question, but it just dawned on me. Does it matter what kind of, like if you're in manufacturing versus industry, does it matter? Are the controls different or are they all the same no matter?
Well, it depends. It's going to come down to what data you're dealing with, right? So if you're manufacturing blast doors for the Navy versus you're manufacturing plastic hose bibs for the Navy, the controls are going to be a different set, right? It just depends on what kind of data you're dealing with. But the frameworks themselves are universal. Like regardless of what that data is, the frameworks that everybody follows is the same. It's what controls you have to implement.
And that may dovetail into two other questions I see here. And I don't want to jump in the middle of Tony unless you had something else, but Jeff, who says he owns a business where they sell parts to the Navy, but they also sell parts to the retail public. They're concerned. They've been notified that they have to do CMMC 1, and they've never done something like that before. They're just a retail store, and they happen to sell metal parts, right? They don't keep any data, any plans, any schematic. He asked what he can do to have, like, he has to meet this. What recommendations do you have for him, Grant?
Just start off with level one, right? If that's all, if they're only selling, parts, small, bibs, hose bibs, or whatever they're selling, that's gonna be level one, really obtainable. Really easy. Just you have to go through that formal process so that you can show when they're asking about renewing your contract. Yep, here's my level one certification, and the problem goes away. Maybe you raise your pricing on them 5 cents a foot. At that point, and then you're recouping any of your costs.
Okay. So then there's another one here from Stan. So Stan owns a full service engineering firm. They have electrical engineers, mechanical, and structural engineers, and they don't do business with the Department of Defense right now, but they'd really like to get those, sweet contracts. So he's not sure what level they should come in at because they don't know what kind of information or contracts they'd be bidding on. So what are your suggestions there?
Yeah, I'm actually a very similar answer. Start with level one. Because there has been no defined information that they're responsible for. But if you start with level one, now you are at a spot where you have a leg up than other people that might be bidding on that contract. And once you've started that, then you at least know what controls you need to have in place when you start bidding on contracts, and then you can price them appropriately. And keep in mind, compliance isn't about it being necessarily done today. Like I've seen where compliance has been signed off on when you're missing certain controls, but you have a plan of action to get those things fixed, right? So auditors understand that not everything happens overnight, and that there are some things that, whether it was a financial hurdle or a technical hurdle, that you couldn't get that control in place. They just want to see progress, right? They want to see maturity and it continuing to get better. And so that's part of that consulting side of it, of sitting down with that client and saying, okay, once you get past level one and you start determining what kind of bids that you're going to be putting, or what sort of contracts you're going to be bidding on, that'll determine what data you're going to be holding, and then you can start figuring out where you want to go. So hopefully that answered that question. But like start somewhere, start with level one. If you don't have a contract that you are sitting on right now.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. We got thumbs up from both of them. So cool. you nailed that one.
Perfect. I forgot to add I'm going to do it live. What the heck? We are going to give away a CMMC compliance level 1 assessment to anybody. And here we go, right here. Forgot to add. This will be on video. That way
we'll just edit this part out later.
We'll just edit my mistake out and cut to the end. The benefit.
So we need to pretend like this never happened, like 3 seconds ago. We're like, yay!
Exactly.
Yes, you just flip back to the last slide and like, yeah.
Everybody should know by now the whole world is produce all of so really getting registrants of this, and anybody who watched video really can get compliance level assessment grant. Scan the QR code. It's a beneficial activity. Even there's no commitment to it. Even if you're not a Succurri client at the moment, just scan this and you get on Grant's calendar. He can help you out, definitely. And as always, thank you guys so much for having these conversations. It's one of the things I realize is that they're valuable. It's like insurance, it's kind of like, oh, okay, there might be more exciting stuff, but when you need this information, you need this. And if you're thinking about working, having contracts with the government already, and your prime contractor is asking you to attest to these levels of CMMC, these guys are the perfect place to come. So check out our YouTube channel, subscribe to it. We cover a lot of good stuff, and it's really, really helpful. And I've just learned a ton from you guys over the years we've been doing this. It's great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. And one last thing, Tony, that you mentioned that kind of popped in my head is that while we're talking about CMMC today, this process doesn't change for any compliance framework, right? And so if you came across this and it's not CMMC that you're looking for, it's something else, we can still help you out.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, there's HIPAA, the financial.
FFIEC, yeah, like there's so many frameworks we can't even list all of them today. But the process is the same, the technology is the same. It's just who you have to report to.
Yeah, we probably should have set up with everything. I mean, CMMC has some deadlines, so we thought maybe this is important. But yeah, that's really good point, Grant. Thank you for reminding us.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.